Really appreciate where we've got to. I would say we've finished the introduction. So we've got in the last, I think it is 9 sessions. This is the ninth session, I believe. We've done with the introduction. So Krishna set the uh, the um the playing field. He's given us the predicament, and he's given us an exploration of a couple of yogas: the yoga of suffering, the yoga of despondency, and the second one, Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of nature. What is material nature? What is spiritual nature? What is existence? How is it? And what is Krishna going to explore in the Gita ahead with us? So now one of my favorite yogas, karma yoga. So today we'll start with chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita is karma yoga. And I'd like to spend a little bit more time at the end talking with some of you, or asking some questions, or for us to explore karma yoga in a bit more detail, because it's so relevant for our life. It's so relevant for even for the person who's not into bhakti or chanting or meditation or spiritual. This is life, the our work, how we act, how we engage in the world. And I want to start with my favorite verses from the Sundarkand, which are of Hanumanji speaking before he goes about his work. And I do this with intention that karma yoga is the great exemplar of karma yoga is Hanumanji. And the verse is, as many of you will know, Prabhas nagar kiji sab kaja, hridaya rakhi kausalapura raja, garala sudari pukarahi mitai, gopada sindhu anala sitalai. Invoking the name of Ram within your heart, go about your work and succeed in your mission. From this, poison will turn into nectar. Enemies will show friendship, and the ocean will become as small as the size of a cow's footprint. Even fire will become cool. Garuda sumera renu samahitai, Rama kripa chitava jai, Atilaga dareu Hanumana, Petah nagara sumeri bhagavana. A mountain, Mount Sumeru, will become like a speck of sand for one who has Ram's grace. So, in essence, everything becomes easy when you have that worldview, that this is all God's work. And that's what we're going to explore in chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita together. So, let's start. First verse, Arjuna. Arjuna speaking, O Janardana, O Krishna, O Keshava. If you think a contemplative life is superior to a life of action, why are you urging me to fight in this battle? So what is contemplative life? You can see the word, if you have the Sanskrit, Buddha, buddhi. So the word Buddha, um, intellectual awareness, knowledge. So Arjuna is confused here. He says, Krishna, I'm bewildered by your words, which seem to be contradictory. Please tell me what is best for me. So at this point, whatever Krishna has taught him, Arjuna hasn't understood. He hasn't got the essence of what Krishna was trying to teach him up till now. Krishna's giving him what we went through, really dense spiritual teachings in the second half of chapter 2 of the Gita. And here, Arjuna is saying, well, if you've told me buddhi is the way, then why are we fighting? Why don't we go to the Himalayan foothills and meditate at the ashram of Neem Karoli Baba instead of engaging in the world and being, dealing with all of the difficulty of poverty, or war and dispute anger and desire? Why don't we just go and retreat? Because that's what you've told me, that knowledge is so important. Now, Krishna responds here, first time speaking in chapter 3. Oh, Arjuna, in the past I've told you about two types of faith. Let's see the word. Buddhim. Yeah. Vidyanisjaya, that's right. I've told you about two types of discipline. The discipline of knowledge for those who follow the path of Sankhya. So there is a path of knowledge that Krishna has spoken about, and the discipline of action for those who follow the path of yoga. So Sankhya Yoga, Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. And then what he refers, interestingly here, yoga is the path of acting in the world. He's talking about karma yoga, not the yoga that we think of as the asanas as such. He's talking about the yoga of using this life as a spiritual practice. Dharmakshetre kurukshetre samaveta yutsavaha mamakav pandavascheva kimakurvata sanjaya. The path of life is the path of dharma. He's talking about that. So now, a person cannot attain freedom from the bonds of action by simply not undertaking action, nor can one attain perfection by renouncing our worldly actions. One cannot exist even for a moment without acting, for all beings are forced to act according to the impulses born of material nature. Prakriti. So this is really interesting here. Krishna's saying to us, even if you think you're not acting, you're acting. Your mind is acting, your thoughts are running wild, you're thinking that you're not doing something. So often Ram Dass would be using the example of, you know, when he became a vegetarian, he would say, look, not only should you practice vegetarian through the physical act, but you should also not crave that, oh, I'm a vegetarian, but I should really eat that beef burger or that burger. Or it's like mentally, you're also causing that action which is going on, and here Krishna is actually, I feel, responding to a wave of movement in India of renunciation around this time period, where imagine a lot of people are going off and becoming monks or sadhus, or disappearing off into the forests, and saying, look, by not acting we'll achieve liberation. But Krishna is actually quite critical of that here. He's saying that well, yoga is an inner practice. It's us doing it and working on that. It's not about us being anywhere else, because for anyone that's ever been to a temple or an ashram or involved in any spiritual organization, you'll know that that's as much of a scene as anywhere else. There can be politics there can be power players, there can be people who want to be seen to be doing all the work, and showing that. So it's very interesting that Krishna is saying this, is that it's inner work. You cannot exist even for a moment without acting. Even we are breathing. And this is because of Prakriti. Prakriti is the gunas, a material nature, which is throughout all of existence. So that's constantly there. So we can't do anything. We're always going to be acting. Now, instruction. One who controls the senses and yet mentally contemplates the object of the senses. One who controls the active senses and yet mentally contemplates the objects of the senses is deluded and is called an impostor. One who controls the senses by the mind and who undertakes karma yoga without attachment is best. Really interesting here. Krishna's talking about that mind, that we might practice a certain way, but unless we apply it from heart, mind, and body, then it's not true. So this is exactly what Krishna's talking about here. Speaking sweetly whilst thinking negative thoughts about somebody. In that kind of way where you might, perhaps it's the British are well known for this, speaking kind words, but in the end, not being so kind. So One who controls the active senses and yet mentally contemplates the objects of the senses is deluded. O Arjuna, one who controls the active senses by the mind and who undertakes karma yoga without attachments is best. This is very important verse, verse 8. Yetu indriyani manasa. You must perform your required duty, for action is better than inaction. For even the maintenance of your body, you cannot exist without acting. Perform your required duty. Perform karma yoga. Yeah. O son of Kunti, except for action performed as a sacrifice, the world is bound by action. And therefore, without attachment, perform your duty as an act of sacrifice. What does that mean? Perform your work as an act of sacrifice. And the word Krishna actually uses, let me see, number 9, yagyasa, yagya. Yagya means sacrificial offering. Like when you do the fire offering, if you imagine you've seen a traditional Hindu fire ceremony where people sit around and they pour offerings into the fire of various items, and they'll be offering flowers or offering items into the into the fire as an offering to God, and and that is called a yagya, a fire offering. Krishna is saying, do your work as if you're performing a yagya. We should live in the world and we should do everything as a yagya. Spiritualize every act as a yagya. And we'll come to this, but it does make me actually I'll refer to it. It's a verse in chapter 4. Maybe I could just explain a little bit of it and we can go into greater detail. In chapter 4, I think it's verse 424. There's a beautiful prayer which I recite before taking a meal. And that is a food prayer. It comes from the Bhagavad Gita. And let's recite it now, maybe. We can just skip ahead to chapter 4, verse 24. We'll find this beautiful verse. Brahma Panam, Brahma Havir, Brahmagno, Brahmanahutam, Brahmevatena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. This is a food prayer which can be recited before eating any meal to spiritualize the act of eating. So just to kind of quickly describe it, and I really will go into more detail when we reach chapter 4 on this one because it's so beautiful. But Krishna's talking about working to give you the example of how our work can become an offering. Eating is also work, right? We have to do some work to eat. So Krishna is saying the sacrificial act is Brahman. The work of eating is Brahman. It is God. Then he's saying the sacrificial oblation is Brahman. So by that, if we refer to use the example of eating, the food is Brahman. Anna Brahman. The food is Brahman. So this whole act of eating is Brahman. The food is Brahman, which goes into the fire of Brahman. So if we think about when we're eating, what could be the fire? The digestive fire. Within us, the digestive fire within us is Brahman. It is poured by Brahman, poured by us, we are Brahman. Indeed, one who is absorbed in the action of Brahman attains Brahman. So it's very nice that, before eating a meal, you often feel that, okay, I joke with some friends. Sometimes we sit down and I say, hey, we should chant the mantra first before starting. Before that, half of them have eaten the food. Food is gone. I say, no, pause for a second. Say the mantra. Brahma Panam, Brahma Havir, Brahma Uttam, Brahmevatena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. And then we now eat. Understanding that we are all Brahman. This act of eating together is Brahman. It's very profound. very profound. We're doing a food distribution for Go Dharmic last night. So many volunteers, so many beneficiaries, more than 300 homeless, vulnerable people all queuing, but it's all Brahman. It's all the body of Maharaji, feeding each other and talking to each other and serving one another. Who volunteers, who benefits, it's all one. There's no higher or lower or, rich or poor. It's all one coming together. You need some clothes, here's some clothes. You need some food, here's some food. You want to speak to somebody, we can talk. The tea, coffee, it all becomes one. And going back to here, this Krishna in verse 9 is saying, 8 and 9 says, you must perform your required duty, for action is better than inaction. For even maintenance of your body, you cannot exist without acting, except for action performed as a sacrifice. This world is bound by action. Therefore, without attachment, perform your duty as a sacrifice. It's this whole idea of sacrifice that we're thinking of. There's two ideas here. One is sacrifice, and also the other is karma. Karma in the sense of bondage. Like when we do um, an act for greed or out of desire or something, those acts bind us more to the world, right? Like there's more attachment, more stuff. Uh, the latest phone. Okay, I've got this one. It's got two cameras. Or the new ones come out with three cameras. It's bondage. We're getting more attachment. The four cameras, five cameras. It's never ending until the whole thing's a camera. It just constantly keeps attaching us and keep pulling us in more into the bondage. Whereas if you perform actions without that and perform it as yagya, as sacrificial offering, it's offering to God. I'm doing this work as an offering to God. I look at my work with Go Dharmic or this session like I am Brahman, offering the Gita, which is Brahman, to Brahman, all of you, with your beautiful cats and dogs. I don't know what that is jumping behind Nish that I can see, but all Brahman. It's all Brahman. It's all one. It's all of us. And it's Brahman offering Brahman to Brahman. And if we act in that way, we all realize Brahman. We all living within that state. In ancient times, Prajapati, the creator, created all beings along with a sacrifice. He declared, become prosperous by performance of sacrifice. Let this be your means to all good things, all desirable things. Therefore, through acts of sacrifice, nourish the gods and let the gods nourish you. Helping each other in this way, you will attain the highest good. Okay, interesting here, the commentators. Shankaracharya refers to the highest good as Svargaloka, or heavenly domain. Others might define it as moksha, liberation, the highest good. But what we can see here in verse 11 is cyclical thinking of life. Like, it's been, we've realized over the last 40, 50 years that we don't have an infinite planet. We don't have infinite resources. We don't have all this way. But previously, people didn't used to think, oh, that there's things like microplastics for all the plastic bags we produce, or, all of this. It was just endless production, endless producing. So I think it's really interesting to see here the ancient form of Hindu worldview, and for that matter, Buddhist and Jain worldview, has cyclical thinking. Everything is cyclical. Like you use something, you offer it up to the gods offer it back to you, and then it gets served back replenished. It's not this idea that, you know, um, everything is just endless or everything is there for our consumption. This is just a sacred offering. We put it back into the earth. We tread gently on the earth, and we use, knowing that what we are using is a sacred offering. We take it in a blessed way, and then hopefully we give back more than we take from the earth, nourishing the gods, and let the gods nourish you. I really feel that here. Let's see. Yeah, I really think here we're talking about nature. We're talking about the gods, but we're also talking about nature. Being nourished by sacrifice, the gods will provide you with all desirable things. One who enjoys things of this world, however, without acknowledging the source is a thief. Very strong words Krishna's using that. We take this land and we say, this is my land. I want Palestine and I want to turn it into a Riviera. And, I'll be selling flats there. And, this it's all God's land. It's all one. It, who does the air belong to? We never think of the air as belonging to anybody. It's all part of nature. It's all land. It's all earth. And we'll return it, if not now, maybe in 50 years, maybe in 100 years, maybe in 1,000 years. It needs to be returned back to nature. And so that's what Krishna's saying here. We're actually stealing when we think it's ours. It's all God's. It's all Maharaji's. One who enjoys the things of this world without acknowledging the source is a thief. The pious eat the remnants of sacrifice, are freed from all sins. But the impious, who cook solely for their own sake, eat only sin. I mean, there's a tip. Let's see the word. Use prasada. 8. Okay. Papa. Yeah, the word sin is not my favorite word to use as a translation. It has a lot of kind of connotations to it. The Sanskrit word is papa, like, wrongdoing. You can say, like, it's leading you in an opposite direction. It's not cultivating goodness. It's not the mode of sattva. Whereas Krishna is saying, if you're offering that food to God and then eating it as prasad, the word is literally prasad, which is used here. Then it's blessed. Then it's sacred food. I think I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again because it's one of my favorites and it means a lot to me with the food distribution work we do at Go Dharmic. There was a businessman who came to Maharaji's ashram and he wanted to distribute prasad at the temple. And he said, I want to distribute lots of sweets. So Maharaji would not normally allow people to take over the distribution in that way, the prasad distribution. He would say, look, just come and serve whatever we're serving and, join in. But he wanted to do it very much as him doing it. He was the doer. And then what happened was some children came, they asked for sweets. He said, no, you've already been, so he didn't give them. Other children came and he said, no, you can't have it. And he got confused. In the end, anyway, he had more food than he should have given out, and there was food waste. And one of the devotees came to Maharaji and said, Maharaji, why did you let him distribute this food? And Maharaji said something very profound. He said, I wanted you to see that distributing Hanumanji's prasad is not easy. What we do here is we offer the food to Hanumanji, and then Hanuman distributes the food. We are not the doer. So whoever receives it, he's already decided who's going to receive that prasad. We just have to be the best spoon we can be to distribute that prasad. So we come out of that, view that, oh, it's us doing everything. It's that ego delicately dropping here. And then it's prasad. So Krishna is saying we should eat the remnants of the offering. I also would mention that a lovely thing I've noticed in a lot of traditional Indian families is often the mother or the woman of the house would often eat last. And they would do it out of really an act of love, that they would feed everyone here. That say, you take food. And then it's almost like they're receiving so much prasad. They're receiving so much blessing after feeding all of these people. Then they eat the prasad. They're eating the remnants of the offerings to everyone. And I think that's a very aspirational thing. So when we're having food with others, maybe it's really nice to serve everyone first. Make sure everybody's taken. Be conscious that there are even other people there instead of grab, eat, and, finish. It's such a much more, spiritual act of eating together, sharing food and oneness together. So all creatures arise from food. Food springs from rain. Rain arises from offerings. and sacrifice is brought about by action. Know that sacrificial action arises from Brahman, and that Brahman arises from the imperishable. Therefore, the all pervading Brahman is eternally situated in all acts of sacrifice. Quite complex verses, actually. This is, quite Upanishadic and dense verses. But the essence is Krishna is saying that when we're performing action in this way, in a spiritual manner, when our work becomes karma yoga, that is Brahman. We are it. We are engaged uh, in spirit. It's spiritual action. And that's an amazing thing where many of us might have a spiritual practice like today of reading the Gita or going away and doing a meditation practice or chanting some mantra or doing this. Krishna is saying when we spiritualize everything we're doing, including the act of having food, taking a meal, then it's all Brahman. Brahman is eternally situated in the acts of sacrifice. Karma Brahmod. Brahman is within the karma. O son of Pritha, one who exists only to enjoy the senses, who fails to maintain the cycle of action, is sinful and lives in vain. So really we have this kind of model that, if we're only out for ourselves, then we're living in vain. We're not really living a spiritual life. We're not achieving our life objective, which is to live in a cyclical way, to live in harmony with nature and God and our inner self, to live in harmony with the planet and, with each other, to live in harmony. That is the way of cycle, not one who only wants to grab from the senses and take, and that is living in vain. But for a person who takes pleasure in the soul, who is self-content, and who rejoices in the self alone, there is no obligation to perform such action. For a person who takes pleasure in the soul, who is self-content and rejoices within, there is no obligation to perform anything. So our pleasure comes from the self. Our pleasure comes from the Atma, which is Sat Chit Ananda, Sat, truthfulness, or truth, Chitta, knowledge, awareness, and Ananda, bliss. If we are within the self, then it's all Brahman. We are happy. We have bliss from that. And then whatever acts we do in the world, that's secondary. The acts are actually whether we're eating a meal or whether we're giving a talk or whether we're uh, playing orchestra in front of 1,000 people, they're just an offering, a different form of offering. And so I always remember Dr. Nicholas Sutton from Birmingham, one of our trustees, wonderful scholar as well. He said, feeding a single child is like feeding the entire universe. So if we're focused on the act, we're focusing on what we're doing in the present moment, it's all just a sacred offering, whether small or big or anything. And then if we perform it as that beautiful offering, then it is a sacred spiritual act. For the person who takes pleasure in the soul, one who is self-content and rejoices in the soul alone, there's no obligation to perform such action. Such a person has no vested interest in what is done or what is not done in the world, nor is the person dependent on any living being. We need nothing. You only need yourselves, friends. So that's the real thing, that if I could share one thing with you from the Bhagavad Gita, it's this, that Krishna is saying to us that we need nothing. We don't need to depend on anybody. We don't need happiness from any external source other than our own selves. whether living in a cave or a palace. And we're going to explore some of these verses. I'd like to get through some of them. I always have this yellow post-it note tagged to this page of the Gita. So I'll be reading some of these beautiful verses, which are absolutely instrumental to the work of Go Dharmic, to the project that we have, because I feel that the work of Go Dharmic is actually relying on this. It's spiritual in nature as a project, even though it's the work itself is secular, and helping everybody equally, and uh, regardless of background or whether they read the Gita or not, doesn't matter. Anybody can be there, but some of the teachings and the messages here are instrumental for that. Therefore, you should always perform your duty without attachment. For acting without attachment, one attains the supreme. By supreme, we mean Brahman. By acting alone, by action alone, King Janaka and others attain perfection. Considering the welfare of the world, you must act. You must perform your duties. Considering the welfare of the world, you should act. Not the welfare of your friends, your family, your nation, or America, or anything, the whole world. So if we're following the Gita wisdom, it's acting for the welfare of the world. Karmaneva hi samsiddhim astidda janakadayaha loka sangrahamevapi sampasyum kartamarhasi loka sangrahamevapi sampasyum kartamarhasi. For the benefit of the world, you should act. Very clear instruction, isn't it? From Krishna, the instruction is very clear. For the benefit of the world, you should act. That's our strong motive here. And he gives the example of Janaka, the father of Sita, is Janaka, and he's a great philosopher king who's famous in the Upanishads. He's famous throughout the Ramayana, of course, known for his charity and learnedness. It's also mentioned here in my copy about, yes, the um famous conversation with Yajnavalkya that he has, Janaka. But he's a philosopher king who acts for the welfare of his people. He's very charitable, very giving, taking care of everyone. And there's an interesting story that Narada. Many people would know Narada as the Bhakti saint. He plays music. He's a kirtan. He's the ultimate kirtanwala. Like maybe Krishna Das is the modern Narada. We could say he's always chanting the name and going around and doing this, and so Narada goes to Svargalok, to the heavens, and he's with Vishnu. And then Narada's chanting, he's playing his instruments, he's doing everything, and then he says to Vishnu, "Surely I'm the greatest devotee." And Vishnu says, "You're great," but he says, "Surely I'm the greatest." And he says, "Well, you're great, but there's one other." And then he creates a vision of Janaka, and Narada is like completely bemused. He can't believe that it could be this worldly king who has a queen, he has a palace, he has, all of these worldly objects all around him. He's managing a palace, he's covered in gold and jewelry and all of this, whereas Narada only chants the name. He's not involved in the world, and he's not doing all this. And Vishnu shows us a scene to Narada of Janaka. And it's very interesting that while Janaka's chanting the name, he's got one hand on the breast of the queen, and the other hand has fallen in fire. And he's just completely immersed in the name. And so for me, that resembles sukha, happiness, or, pleasure, and dukkha, sadness, suffering. And in the midst of both good and bad acts happening to him, of struggle, difficulty, and goodness, Janaka is able to still be concentrated on God and chanting the name and reciting and being in bliss. So that this verse here is really one to memorize in the Bhagavad Gita. If there was one, Loka Sangraham Evapi Sampasyam Kartamarhasi, for the benefit of the world you should act. What a reminder for us to how to live our life. That constant reminder that let's be ones who work for the benefit of the world. That we have this beautiful earth, we have beautiful nature to protect, we have all living beings that we can work for. And that gives me great hope that there is a way of looking for the welfare of all beings. I have it underlined and post-it noted. So it's probably quite, you can imagine it's quite a nice thing. Whatever action is performed by great people, all of mankind follows. Whatever example such a person acts sets the whole world pursues. I think it's really a point here about, we could talk about famous people in the world and the responsibility that comes with that fame, or the leaders, the politicians, or the celebrities. When they do something, so many young people follow them, so many other people in society. We see it with a lot of our politics, when a lot of divisive politics actually comes out vocally in public, we see that bubble down in society, don't we? Where a lot of people will then, be a bit more racist in their acts on the train station, or kind of you see, a bit more um, kind of divisive commentary, or people become a bit more anger ridden when the leaders are like that. And Krishna's really saying whatever those leaders of society do, people will follow that example, and the world will follow that example. O son of Pritha, in all the three worlds there is nothing that I must do, nor is there anything that I have not attained, but yet I engage in work. Krishna's saying, look at me. Even though there's nothing in the whole three worlds, in the entire cosmos, in the universe that I need to do, but still I'm here acting. It's quite profound to think that God incarnated on earth, who's teaching Arjuna this at the time, and we are Arjuna. Let that not be mistaken, that Arjuna is us, and that indwelling Lord is Krishna within us. And saying, Krishna saying he's acting all the time, present, here and now, with us. And he's still doing it even though he doesn't need to do anything. And I think about Maharaji with Neem Karoli Baba. If you ever seen any videos of Neem Karoli Baba online chanting, he not really with beads, but you hear him loudly chanting Ram 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 Ram, like really, loud and energetically, and he was always constantly in practice, constantly serving people, and full of action. And you think, why does he need to do that? He's already a liberated being. He's an enlightened being. He has already achieved that state, but yet he's chanting the name constantly. If you see notebooks of his, full, hundreds of notebooks full of Ram Nam. Again and again, morning after Ram, 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 reciting Ram Nam, notebook after notebook after notebook. Why does he need to do that? But he does, he acts. He acts for out of love, in love, being love, and acting for the welfare of the world. Always constantly serving others, always constantly giving of himself, and being that. Krishna says, for if I cease to work, O Partha, all of mankind would surely follow my path. They would also cease to work. All of these worlds would perish if I did not work. I would be the cause of unwanted populations and the destruction of all creatures. O descendant of Bharata, as an ignorant person works with attachment, so a learned person should act without attachment, and again, loka sangraham, for the benefit of the world. This is the second time in 3 verses that Krishna uses those words, loka sangraham, And it's a really beautiful um, combination of words. Loka means people, or all beings, or world. It's referencing, and sangraham is that togetherness or welfare of, caring for. So loka sangraham is taking care of all of us, taking care of all of the world. Loka sangraham. We spend a lot of time on personal mission, personal ambition. I want to be this when I'm older. I want to do this way. This is where I want to travel. Krishna's saying change the mission statement to Loka Sangram. What can I do for the welfare of the world? How can I act for the benefit of nature? I look at wonderful exemplars like Jane Goodall, who does so much for nature, and such a beautiful, even in the 90s, going around the world to share hope and love of nature, and the message that we should take care of the natural world. O descendant of Bharata, as an ignorant person works without attachment, so a learned person should act without attachment and for the welfare of the world. One should not disturb the understanding of the ignorant who are attached to action. Instead, acting with discipline, the learned should engage them in beneficial works. Interesting point. One should not disturb the understanding of the ignorant who are attached to action. Instead, acting with discipline, the learned should engage them in beneficial works. Basically, don't try to convince anyone of anything. Ram Dass would say, I can't change anybody, I can only love them. So if you can help somebody to do good acts in the world when they are ready and they're in that place and they're not harming someone, and you can help them to do that beneficial work, then help them to get to that place of beneficial work. But don't try to, put your understanding on anyone else. So engaging, do your good work, do your dharma, act for the benefit of the world, but don't try to put that on anyone else because they see differently. Like we saw earlier, for worldly person, it is like day and night, spiritual path. And for a person involved in this worldview of spiritual view, then you will see it all as one, and you're thinking much broader. Your view is for the benefit of the world, and not just for the benefit of the self, or the closest unit of um, understanding. So let's pause there.